Welcome into Rounding the Bases.
Round the bases. Everybody knows Joe Goldberg. It's around the bases. Everybody knows Joe Goldberg.
Rounding the Bases is usually a podcast about culture and leadership with the perspective of executives and entrepreneurs, but on a semi-regular basis, I like to be able to highlight causes that matter, to be able to use my voice and my platform to raise awareness. And January is Human Trafficking Awareness Month. And I think that that is a topic, certainly a major problem, an issue in all communities around the country and the world for that matter, that maybe we've heard about, but we don't fully understand. That was certainly the case for me, but I was lucky enough to meet a couple of experts on the topic that I feature throughout this month. And I'm doing a 4-part series, very insightful, very significant, tough at times to listen or watch, but I think something that we all need to know about because it's going on all over the place. And if you want to listen to all 4 parts on the audio side, iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast, just search for Rounding the Bases with Joel Goldberg, and they'll be up every Thursday in January. But I'm doing condensed versions, 4 parts on YouTube, where you can see it, you can get to know some people and learn more about this major issue. And they're going about trying to stop this in a different way. Instead of just making arrests and trying to get people off the streets, and they always come back to the streets, it's really trying to build relationships and trust and utilize the social workers and really change the tactics and to be able to save lives and to be able to help communities. And so I hope you'll check it all out, whether it be audio or here on YouTube. It really is important to all of us.
I've been doing this work for about 10 years, and so it's my whole life, but I do realize that there's a good segment of the general public that is really still learning some very basic things about it. And you're correct. There really is no community that is in some way not impacted by it. Just like it would be hard to point to a community that isn't impacted by the use of drugs. You know, the latest, I shouldn't say the latest, but I think the most recent and best estimates for the prevalence of this across the world, they say there are about 40 million people who are currently in some form of human trafficking. That amounts to about $150 billion global annual industry. So this is big money. So, and in terms of dollars, that makes it the second largest, most pervasive crime on earth, behind the illegal trade in drugs.
This stuff is happening oftentimes right literally in front of our eyes, and we have no idea. At what point did this really, I don't know, for lack of a better term, shock you? I'm sure nothing shocks you anymore, but early on in your career, working in so many of these different fields, there has to be a point where this really moved you, I assume.
Yeah, I was working, I still remember this so clearly to this day when I was working violent crime, and we really didn't know what human trafficking was. Law enforcement didn't have training on human trafficking. We weren't taught about human trafficking. And unfortunately, that's still the case in most law enforcement agencies across the country. And I remember seeing this young lady who was with this gentleman, and I'm thinking, that's just not right. There's something not right about this. And I remember going and trying to talk to her, but I really just didn't understand what to do. And ultimately I got frustrated because she wasn't communicating with me. She wasn't telling me that she was in trouble. She wasn't telling me that she was being trafficked. And then I remember a couple months later, I got a call from local PD, and they had found this young lady dead in a bathtub in one of these, rent by the week hotels. And she'd cut her wrist and had died. And ultimately what we found out from her mother was that she was molested by a neighbor from the time she was 7 until about 9 or 10. She never told anybody. She ran away from home multiple times, didn't do well in school, and eventually left home and quit school at 17. And the mother didn't even see her for like a couple years. And eventually she became a trafficking victim due to all her vulnerabilities. She got pregnant, had a child that tested positive for methamphetamine. And then eventually, she's found in this bathtub, deceased. And I took that kind of hard at the time because I mean, she was right in front of me. I had her basically right here. I just didn't know what to do. And I really felt like I completely let her down. I mean, we're supposed to protect and serve people, and I didn't protect and serve her. And I didn't kill her. I wasn't the one that was responsible for that. But, you know, that person that molested her when she was a kid killed a part of her, and the trafficker killed a part of her, and all those Johns killed a part of her, until ultimately she was so desperate that she killed herself at like 21 years old. And that was a very powerful moment for me where I go, we've got to do better than this.
So Dan, a retired Missouri state trooper with a lifetime of experience investigating human trafficking, narcotics, vice, homicide, and other violent crimes, joined forces with Allison and her past history as director of the Anti-Human Trafficking Force for the Missouri Attorney General's Office. They co-founded the Human Trafficking Training Center. Among their many critical tasks in fighting this cause, the most important may just be teaching law enforcement the proper strategies to stop human trafficking. Most don't know, leading to a never-ending and often deadly cycle.
In the human trafficking field, when I first started, you know, getting involved in this, there really wasn't a mentor. There really wasn't someone to teach us how to do these things. So we were failing a lot. We were making mistakes a lot. Allison came along, and it was just like this amazing connection right away. We had the same exact vision, and she was smart. She was completely passionate about this. And I think the big thing was she was utterly fearless.
Of course, they can't do it alone. When it comes to the word fearless, Dan and Allison need the help of courageous survivors to tell their stories of escaping a dangerous life, often in some of the worst neighborhoods in any city across America. Women who faced unthinkable conditions for years and never had reason to trust law enforcement. One of the questions I and many others have can seem so simple, but yet it's complicated. If you're not being held captive physically, why not just run to safety? Dan and Allison connected me with one of the bravest people I've ever interviewed named Megan, and she helped fill in the blanks.
So there are a lot of reasons that survivors can't just walk out. And some of that is the different kind of control that's over them. You mentioned Stockholm Syndrome, and that's a really, really important piece to consider. A lot of what traffickers do is they find the need or the vulnerability in a person, and then they exploit that. So if a person is in need of a father figure, that's what they're going to be. If a person is in need of a place to stay or food, they're going to provide those and then demand like exploitation and as like a kind of a debt. You'll see a lot of what we call Romeo or boyfriend pimps. So, you know, it's just like, baby, I love you so much. Everything is really good. I can't wait to have this life together with you, but I just need you to help me pay this. So I just need you to do this, and then we're going to be gone. And so a lot of it is brainwashing, and the threats and intimidation, and as well as like the beatings that happen sometimes, are very real and are a big part of why people don't leave. But there's also this way of, as long as the trafficker can keep you believing that you're working towards a goal together and that this is temporary, sometimes that keeps people from seeing what's actually happening in their situation and staying. A lot of times with the physical threat and intimidation, there is that being convinced, like, nobody's going to take you back. Nobody loves you.
So I'll just fill in a couple of small blanks without going into the details, but you are a survivor. You were trafficked. There were a lot of drugs in terms of manipulation that were, you can stop me if I'm wrong on any of this, but that were involved. I know there was dancing and strip clubs and sex and all this type of stuff. And something that I'm learning is that trafficking goes on in front of all of us. And I remember Dan and Allison saying to me, you know, like in the old school days, certainly when I was growing up, it was beware of the creepy van down the street, or don't talk to strangers. And there's this assumption that this stuff is happening where some girl or woman is, you know, chained to a bed in the basement. But the bulk of trafficking that's going on is not the person tied to the basement. You might see these people out in public all the time. How accurate is that? And is that kind of what you experience too?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. I think that we have come to a new understanding, continuously learning more and more about trafficking in our society. And I mean, I think that started from this doesn't happen to this only happens in other countries to, okay, maybe it happens, but it's people getting, just people being abducted. And then now it's just people being groomed online. But the reality of it is that there is either trafficking or commercial sexual exploitation happening everywhere all around you. And in the same way that society is kind of groomed by media for what their definition of trafficking is, like we all seen that one movie that everybody talks about that talks about trafficking, that also impacts the survivors. So like if your idea of what trafficking is based on media is somebody chained to a radiator, even while I'm being trafficked, I'm probably also watching TV and seeing those things and being like, well, that's trafficking. What's happening to me though is not, because it's not that. So the same media influences that culture brings together to show what trafficking is are also affecting survivors from identifying their own victimization. And some of that is survival. So there's a huge need to feel like you are part of something, like you are in control of your situation in order to survive. If I, when I was in the life, had understood that I was a victim of trafficking, I would not have been able to survive to get out, because there's no way that I could have gone through that, accepted and understood the seriousness of my situation, and still got up every day and did what I needed to do. We protect ourselves many times by feeling like it's our choice, feeling like, taking power in a hotel room or whatever. And it doesn't mean that people are not victims.
We will hear more from Megan in upcoming episodes and focus on other aspects of trafficking. It's not just taking place on the streets, casinos, truck stops, massage parlors. So who are the patrons? The answer may surprise you.
We see it come from everywhere. I've seen elected officials, I've seen police officers, I've seen lawyers, doctors, military folks, business people. I mean, it comes from all over the place. Probably the biggest place that we see it come from is probably upper middle class, married, professional men. It never ceases to amaze me how many men are, seeking out girls that they can pay for. And I say girls, but obviously sometimes it's boys too, and they're looking to fulfill fantasies, or they're looking to do a variety of different things that maybe they feel like they can't do in their home life or whatever. And they're doing these things and they're willing to pay money to do it. And then they go home to a wife and a couple kids and to little league games and soccer practice. And that's what we see. It's disturbing, but that's the reality of the situation.
Just to give people an idea, what percentage of this money are they even getting?
They're getting none of it. I mean, seldom do they ever get any of it. And it's a debt that they'll never pay off. And your trafficker, it's super common for traffickers to assault these girls, to beat them up. They end up in the hospital. They end up, stabbed. They end up, whatever.
Please share this and check out the other episodes coming soon, or the audio versions wherever you get your podcasts. A huge thanks to Dan and Allison for spending so much time, not just in the interview, but taking me around town and showing me some things that were tough to look at, but really sunk in, and all this matters. And then an absolutely huge thanks to Megan, her bravery, her courage, her intelligence, her eloquence, and her ability to share her story and to be able to help so many others. She's making a huge impact. Hope to see you next time on YouTube here on Rounding the Bases.